Julie Menanno is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a leading voice on attachment styles with 1.2 million Instagram followers and counting, and the author of the best-selling book, Secure Love: Creating a Relationship That Lasts a Lifetime. She earned her master's degree in psychology and has a clinical therapy practice in Bozeman, Montana, using EFT therapy for couples working on attachment issues. Julie is also a wife of 24 years and a mom to 6 kids and 1 dog. On episode 2 of this two-part podcast, we get to know Julie a whole lot better, partially with the help of her husband, who joins as a surprise call-in guest. Even I didn't know that was going to happen. We talk through her evangelical childhood and how it impacted her career choice. We talk about what being a boy mom can teach us about being better in romantic relationships. And we look at why a midlife romantic post-mortem can be so very important. My grand conclusion is that she was, in fact, born to do this work and destined to outline in her unique way what it takes to create secure love. By the end of our talk, I'm pretty sure I officially win at podcasting because, according to Julie, who is renowned by millions of followers, I made her feel seen. You make the point that changing the relationship is really just changing the environment, not changing the partner. Um,
Absolutely.
and even if they can get intellectually to the point where they understand that creating a safe environment is the only shot the relationship has at getting better,
Mhm,
right? They have to be willing to stop trying to change the other person, which is hard
mhm.
emotionally, but they also have to be willing to accept the possibility that the partner still will not change. And that's
Absolutely.
scary.
Yeah.
If you're willing to do that much work and the person never changes, well, now you've got some information you might have to do something about. What percentage of people do you think can actually handle that?
Well, it really depends on how much hope they have. So that really depends on the quality of help they're getting. We none of this works if you don't know the right things to put into practice. Um, so if you have access to the right information and you're able to have the capacity, the emotional maturity and capacity to put it into play, or at least get better at putting it into play, you probably will start to see results, on some level relatively quickly, and even though it's not going to necessarily dramatically change the relationship, it might just be results that help you walk away going, wow, I feel a lot better about myself. I know that was hard. At first, I felt horrible. I got vulnerable. I felt dropped. That was a terrible feeling. But 2 days later, I get to look back and go, wow, I'm really glad I showed up in a new way because I'm growing as a person. So, and let me just back up a little bit. I don't want people, the work isn't necessarily going to the most vulnerable places when your partner can't hold that. So there's a lot of
Mhm,
complications and layers to this work, but there
mhm,
there is a way to be vulnerable without, exposing your whole soul when your partner isn't able to take that in. But anyway, backing up a bit, I don't know the answer to how many people are able to put this work into practice as a self help version. I really don't know because I don't have access to those people. I do know what I know the feedback I get on Instagram, and that's that a lot of people, a lot of the time, I get DMs, I get emails, I get comments on my posts that, wow, this information changed my relationship. The reviews of my book on Amazon, I mean, it's just overwhelmingly people saying, I realized that I could do a lot by just changing me, and so I have reason to believe that a lot of people are getting there, but I'm also not hearing from the people you know, who aren't able to keep going with it. So I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for that. But I do know when
mhm,
I'm working with someone, I get it. I get them there because I'm constantly recalibrating and figuring out what is getting in the way of you doing this work. Let's just hold that and talk about it. Yeah. Coming at it with heated protest makes sense, and I want to
mhm,
validate that. It's not working for you, and I want to help shift that, but I also want to honor the function of that protective behavior. And I want your partner to be able to validate the protective function of that behavior. So do you see how
So,
I'm holding that and being confrontational of it at the same time? Which I think is not
yes.
answering your question, but sorry.
But no, but you take a lot of the emotional charge out of this. The way that you
Absolutely.
talk
While
about
keeping it
relationships.
emotionally alive, though. And that's part
Exactly,
of the art. Yeah, is you can't
exactly.
not work with the live emotion, but you do definitely have to take the dysregulated aspect out of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wanna jump to another question that's relationship oriented, but I don't wanna forget to ask you, what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't doing this?
Nothing but being a mom. This is my I was born to do this. I knew it from a young age. I
Mm.
don't think there's anything learning Italian, and I love learning Italian, skiing, but, professionally speaking, this is all I can imagine spending my time doing.
Where did it come from? Where did your interest in
I
it come
think it
from?
came um, from a very, very young age, having a real awareness that something wasn't right and my needs weren't met, and they're just kind of being able to see dysfunction really clearly, and maybe not always being able to name it, but also recognizing people aren't bad. I recognized that pretty early on. People aren't bad. There's something else happening here that and and by the time I was in 8th grade, I something about Hamlet hit me. Hamlet's very psychological. So that kind of hit me, and then I saw do you remember Prince of you're my age, so you probably remember Prince of Tides with Barbara
Oh, yeah.
Streisand? Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was, like, obsessed with her. I was like, "I wanna that's cool." Like, that was my version of cool. It wasn't like,
Right,
pop stars or, models or what actresses. It was Barbara
right.
Streisand's character in Prince of Tides. Like, how therapist nerd do you get, like, in 8th grade? So, like,
I love that.
if that's
We
not a
just got
sign,
some
what
insight into
is?
you. So
What?
we just got some insight into you, which is kind of
Yeah.
what I wanted. So you feel, you know, you feel do you feel like as a child not getting some of your needs met and having an internal setting for empathy is why you were able to try to figure this out? Like looking at the adults around you and not being able to reconcile, knowing that they are good because they must be good because they're your
Yeah.
adults, not being able to reconcile that information with not getting your needs met and knowing that that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think it was at the time, there was a lot of anger I had toward them. So it wasn't necessarily they're good, although that piece was there too. It was more like that with them, it was more like they're good, they're bad, they're good, they're bad, they're good, they're bad. Because I was getting all these mixed, it's like in dysfunctional homes, you're getting good stuff and bad stuff. So you never really know what to grab onto. But um, it was more like humanity's good. Like people are born good. I grew up in this like fun, really evangelical, rigid Christian environment where we really did learn people are either born bad or good. And I knew people were not born bad. And then there's this other piece of me that, I have a background in math. I also have this other part of me that is very drawn to puzzles and problem solving in a really kind of concrete way. Like I really need to understand theoretically cause and effect, but then I add in this emotional piece and it just feels very artistic almost, and kind of like having the skill of being an artist, being the drawing skills, the spatial relation skills, but then on top of that adding in the emotional passion. Like it feels like that's very complete for me. That's like of my whole expression of who I am kind of thing.
That completes the picture for me
Okay.
because there is a level of just like really genuine, soft empathy that you have. It comes through in the book, it comes through in your
Mhm.
social media, it comes through in the way that you're talking to me right now, that you are so gentle with your empathy. And if you're growing up in a very strict religious upbringing of any kind,
Mhm.
evangelical, whatever you want to call it, um, the prioritization of wanting everyone to feel heard, but
Mhm.
also understanding that at a core level, everybody needs to be seen as good makes
Yeah.
sense,
Yeah.
right? And if they need to be seen as good, then they need to have their reasons audited to the point where it gets to where there's a reason why they did that, and that is understandable. They cheated,
Absolutely.
but here's
Yeah.
the 75 steps below, and let's get to the point, right?
Yes.
So now I see why you were born for this work.
Thank you. I feel very seen. That's probably
Oh,
the best feedback
I
I've
made
ever
you feel
received.
seen?
Oh,
Oh, I love
absolutely.
that.
You're great at your job. I mean, I feel just so special and, like, appreciated, and no, it feels
Isn't
great. I mean,
it? Did I just help your nervous system?
you absolutely are helping my nervous system. This is your First of all, I'm struck by your level of insight and brilliance, so I'll just give you
Thank you.
that. But yeah,
No, I
no,
feel
you
seen or elevated, but I'll take it.
yeah, you would be
Take
an
it.
amazing therapist. I don't know if that
I'd
is
be so
interesting.
frustrated. I'd be so frustrated. I'm busy therapizing myself and trying
Yeah,
to find
yeah.
a relationship, and then
It's
when we get there and we start fighting, I'm gonna call you.
Yeah, please
Um,
do.
then you're gonna be like, "Poonam, Poonam, you asked me
Yeah.
once, what I'm really thinking. I'm gonna tell you what I'm really thinking. Stop being a dummy." That's what
But
you're
that
gonna
is
say.
a strength, though. That's a
Yeah.
strength. People feel safe with people who are, they know. I get it. Like, there's a balance to be had, right? But
Yeah.
people do really feel safe with straight shooters. I like
That's true.
straight shooters. I don't
That's true.
like to wonder. So,
Part of it is the New York thing.
yeah, I
Um,
and I love that about New Yorkers. I love it. And Italians are like that too.
yeah.
They're not Yeah, probably why, they're most many New Yorkers are Italian, so not most, but many.
Yeah. Well, and Indians and Italians get along well for that reason, because I am Indian.
Exactly.
There's something we will speak with our hands. It's a thing. Well, I record this
Mm.
from New York City, so you're going to hear ambulances in the background.
My favorite thing about New York, it actually helps me sleep.
Really? Let's
Yeah.
just go right into it.
Okay, so I need to be cold to sleep at night, and he likes to be cold too, but I like to be ice cold, and
Mhm,
so
mhm.
we always have this ongoing thing with the air conditioner. I'm spoiled here because summers in Montana aren't bad, but
Yeah.
so I'm a gadget person. And so I decided to order this thing called a bed jet. And it didn't really elaborate too much on the website about how it actually worked. So what it is, it's like a self-contained air conditioner unit, and it has a hose attached to it. And then the hose attaches to the bottom end of the mattress, and it basically just blows cold air up through the bed. But it's supposedly only on one side of the bed where you put it.
Oh,
And so I get the thing. I put it in the bed, and it's absolute nuts. Okay, it's like, first of all, it creates this big bubble, and it is really cold. I'll give it that, but it's also like concentrated on your feet. And so
mhm.
your feet are just freezing. The rest of you isn't. And then you're surrounded by this big bubble. So I didn't tell him about it. I just waited for him to come in the room. And so he comes in the room, and he hears this loud motor. And then he looks at the bed, and he sees this bubble, and he starts patting, and then he, like, picks it up, the cover, and then at the bottom sees this giant unit with this hose, and he was like, "Oh my god, I don't even know what's happening right now." But that's pretty much par for the course in our relationship. So
Well, listen, if that's the
yeah,
worst thing that you're gonna do, then I think he's probably in good shape. But I
yeah.
am kind of like curious about what he said and then what he's supposed to say. Maybe
Uh,
he said, "What are you doing to me, woman?"
and so he's gotten to the point where he's like, whatever helps. And so I said, I was like, you can't feel it, can you? And he was like, oh yeah, I can feel it. And he's over there shivering. So
All right. So is part one
he's
of
a
the
trooper.
podcast called perimenopause and all of the symptoms that we
Yeah,
have and why we're
seriously,
miserable at
right?
night?
I know. It's
I want to talk about you.
Well, no,
So
I really get that because I can understand how couples end up sleeping in different rooms.
I
You
get
can't have a good relationship without good sleep. So,
it.
mhm,
New Yorkers are also not patient. And
mhm.
patience is not my default setting. I wanted to talk a little bit about motherhood. So I think it's
Oh, I
interesting that you
love this
mentioned that that's
topic.
what you would be doing. You know, if you weren't doing this, you would be
Mhm.
focusing on the babies. And I get that because it is more than a full time job, as everyone who has ever seen a mom in action understands. It's
Well,
okay to recognize your own
yeah,
impatience.
it will get there. It will get there.
motherhood has certainly tested that. And in a
Mhm.
way, for me, being a mom to a boy has been really illuminating
Mhm.
because I only had a sister growing up. So I still think of males as sort of a foreign species on some level. But he's taught me a lot. Seeing him develop has taught me a lot about what the boys inside of men really need. Because my
Yeah.
default setting as his mom is to assume he's always coming from a good place.
Mhm.
And
I love that.
my visceral understanding is that he needs me to calm him by holding steady when
Yes.
he can't, right?
Mhm.
And I knew that before I had any of the terminology because you just see a boy becoming a boy and you can literally see them having too much energy and not knowing what to do with it. You can
Mhm.
see it happen as your child goes from a baby
Absolutely.
to a boy to a whatever, to a person who needs deodorant.
Yeah.
But they say that, unstable attachment, I heard at some point, unstable attachment with the mom is one of the major causes for issues
I
in
agree with
boys.
that.
And so
Yeah.
now I look back over my whole life, my relationships, and it puts it into a different context. But
Mhm.
one of the distinctions that you made in your book was that there's a difference between active listening and loving listening.
Mhm.
It's a small difference, but I love that phrase because my impatient self has always thought of this phrase active listening as annoying.
Yeah.
Because, for a naturally not so patient person to have to actively listen made me feel like I was infantilizing my partner.
Mhm.
Like you should be quick on the uptake.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's horrible. That's horrible, right? But it's how I felt. And we don't do that with our children because
Mhm.
loving listening sounds much more just basically like primal empathy for my child.
Absolutely. It's easier. Yeah.
And when we
Well,
do that
can
for
be
our
easier.
children, we're not looking for anything in return,
Mhm.
right? We're
Yes.
saying, I'm going to leave it all on the field. I need to create a safe environment in this home. And then, God willing, Bhagwan, God in Hindi,
Mhm.
will show them the way in their life. But all I can do is create the environment, right? Now, they're always mine. It's not like I'm going to break up with my kids. But it's just there's sort of the idea of giving them an anchor to their nervous system is so natural
It
as a
is.
mom,
Yeah.
especially for my boy. Um, we're talking on an intellectual level, but we don't always handle relating intellectually. So it's I wonder if you think that those subtle differences land with people, like that difference between active listening and loving
Mhm.
listening, it's burned into my brain after I
I'm
read your
really
book.
happy to hear that. I think that's probably one of the most important pieces in the book,
Mhm.
honestly. Um, yeah.
And it's hard. Can you
Mhm.
explain? You talked a little bit about attachment wounds and shame. Is it possible for you to explain or diagram out what happens when someone who's securely attached is in a relationship with someone who is not, and how things spiral?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first, okay, so if someone goes into the relationship, right, and they have an expectation of being emotionally responded to and having emotional closeness and having the other partner being able to take in their response of this, that they also, the secure partner knows how to do. And all of a sudden, it's not for most people, it's not a conscious template. It's just an implicit template because that's how they were treated, enough of the time that that's just what they assume, right? So let's say that, you have that expectation of emotional reciprocity and health, and you get in a relationship with someone and they're, you know, a lot of things are going well and, they're attentive and all of these things, but they don't really know how to fully be emotionally available. You don't really recognize that. You maybe jump in too soon to a commitment or for whatever reason. Some people are good at faking it. And then you get into the relationship and negative cycles start to happen. And then your template starts to get thrown off kilter. And like at first, you don't really know what's going on. And then you start to kind of maybe slowly adjust your template to them and lower your expectations, really. Or you try to protest and get them to be different because you just don't even know what to do with all of this stuff, and so then you end up feeling scared and not close. And even though you did have a secure attachment because the people in your life were relatively supportive, you might just not know how to deal with someone who isn't, because you never learned, you know.
Let's say you go through that spiral.
Mhm.
Let's say you do your postmortem. Let's say you get out of that spiral or out of that situation. How do you repair yourself? There's a part where you're trying to repair a relationship after an
Mhm.
attachment wound, after some damage, after some infidelity, after some inappropriateness, whatever it is. But then there's a part where people leave relationships and they think that that's the end. And I don't think that's the end, because you either have to repair the relationship or you have
Mhm.
to repair yourself. Either
Yeah.
way, how do you repair yourself?
Two ways. There's two pieces to it. And I think some people get stuck in one or the other. And we got to do both, which is, and this is what I'm always helping my clients do. I call it co-meaning, co-regulation. So what that is you have to be able to intellectually make sense of what went wrong. So you have words for it, so you can actively do something different later. You have to be able to make sense of it, so you don't take it on as, what is it about me? I must be bad. Or you don't take it on as, they're all bad. You're able to sort of see the big picture. You might need help from someone who is, a relationship expert, to help you make sense of it in the healthiest way possible. So in the service of going forward with the next relationship, kind of having that intellectual understanding of what you don't want to repeat. But there's also this emotional piece that we can't ignore, where you're actually like getting into those feelings, grieving those feelings, being with those feelings, not abandoning yourself, in the grief around it or the anger around it, and really being able to process the emotions. Because if you don't process those emotions, they get stuck in your body, and it doesn't matter how much intellectual knowledge you have, you're going to act them out until they get, healed. So both of those
Well, that's
strategies.
why I think it's really powerful that you explain in the book that your attachment style can change. Because we walk around thinking
100%.
we are a
Yeah.
certain way, and then we can find ourselves in a situation, and you can start telling yourself a crazy story. There's only the story that we tell ourselves, or you can start telling yourself that maybe you were always anxiously attached, maybe this,
Hmm.
maybe that, maybe it was your fault, whatever.
Hmm.
But you describe the good enough relationship,
Hmm.
and you talk about things that are non-perfect as being good enough. I like the phrase "the good enough relationship" because
Hmm.
I do have some friends who will complain about things where I'm like, if only that's the thing I had to complain about. Stop calling me, or
Yeah.
I'll put you on speaker while I cook. You let it
Yeah.
out. And
Uh-huh.
I'm good with the phrase now. Do you want me to listen, or do you want my opinion? And people are
Yeah.
always like, "Oh, I just want you to listen." And you go,
I
"Okay,
know.
then I'm
Isn't
gonna
that
be more
great?
honest with
Yeah.
you, right?"
Someone on
It makes
Instagram
you feel
one
seen.
Yeah, someone on Instagram once said, "Do you want a trash can or a toolbox?" I love that.
A trash can or a toolbox.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that too. But, I see so many people, unfortunately, who I think define that wrong. They
Mhm.
define good enough relationship as non-abusive in the context of
Um,
we have kids and I'm never
yeah,
leaving.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right? And so they
yeah,
say good enough
absolutely.
is we are not abusing each other. Meanwhile, we haven't touched each other in 5 years. I mean,
Mhm,
this is a lot of my friends.
mhm.
Um, I don't like his family. He doesn't like my family. He never wants to
Yeah,
hang out with my friends. She never wants to do anything I want to do. All of the things, but without any connection. And I think the
right.
problem
That's
is good
unfulfilling.
enough relationships don't exist without connection, and people aren't thinking about it that way. So can you describe, for the benefit of people listening who think they're in a good enough relationship but are
Mhm,
maybe not, the damage to the self that comes from defining a lack of abuse as good enough?
mhm. Right, it's interesting because I put a post up today called "How to Heal from Anxious Attachment." I did this four-part series on anxious attachment, which was like chapter 1, chapter 2, childhood environment, how it shows up in adult. And then the last one is how to heal. And one of those is just called the good enough relationship. And I describe what that is. It's not a relationship that is unfulfilling. It's a relationship where multiple truths can be held at the same time, especially, big picture. My partner fails me sometimes. Most of the time they don't, but they're still good. They're still overall a good partner. A lot of the times they do show up for me. Or, you know, in a moment when my partner is really letting me down, I'm able to hold on to the fact that even though they're letting me down right here and now, I'm not going to extrapolate that into this is going to be forever. Now they're bad. Now I'm going to run away from this, which is easy to do in hard moments, you know, especially people who grew up in homes where they were under threat a lot of the time. And the third piece is rupture and repair. I mean, if you're not repairing and getting back to the climate of closeness, that's really not good enough. It's not the ruptures that, you know, are the necessarily the problem. If there's tons of ruptures all the time and ruptures are defining the relationship, that's a problem. But good enough relationships are not rupture free. I think that's it. It's like they're not rupture free, but they're also not unrepaired rupture full. So, I mean, I feel like I live in the quintessential good enough relationship. I mean, we were camping this weekend with I have 6 kids. I don't know if you know that, but
I do.
yeah. So we were with 3 of my daughters because they're teens now. So the older 3 are kind of like not hanging around as much, you know,
They're
when we
not
go.
interested in you anymore?
You know what's funny is I'm their favorite person to talk to because
Oh my god, that's great.
yeah.
Please repeat that because I'm terrified
Oh,
my kids aren't gonna talk to
listen,
me in a few
I gotta
years.
be honest with you. I was not a good mom with young kids. I don't do well. It's just not my strength. I just, you know, I hate
But with
that, but I
6
also
kids,
accept it as true.
who's gonna be
Yeah.
good with 6 small kids? Who's gonna even be alive with 6 small kids?
It's
That's not
I
a fair
had
judgment of yourself.
I feel very fortunate that we had the resources. There was a time when it was very, very, very difficult, but I felt like, look, I would rather put the financial resources into getting me some help now when they're little, even above paying for college later, because I knew how important that emotional environment was. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to give it to them on my own. But I'm amazing with teenagers. I mean, it's like rock star mom. And I love it because I get to feel so successful now. Anyway, I had these, you know, my 3 daughters and they're all, oh my God, the chargers and the phones. That the bane of my existence is chargers. And where's my charger? Who took my charger? And then all the different ways that you can plug it into the wall and in the phone. But so so I've got the 3 girls coming at me with a charger dispute, right? Where's my charger? Who took my charger? Blah, blah, I didn't take your charger. Ma, and they all come to me. And then my husband is now needing help with something. And so he's like, babe, where's the blah, blah, blah? Where's the blah, blah, blah? So they're all coming at me. My nervous system does not, I don't know if anybody's does, do well with 4 people talking to me at once and needing something from me. And I
I can't
really
handle 6.
snapped at him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, I don't know. I have 3 other people speaking to me right now. Like that's how I talk to him, right? That's not okay. I mean, that hurts his feelings. Like we have a lot of resilience because we have a secure attachment. So he's able to walk away and be fine with that. But then he's left alone with that hurt, right? And he, as an avoidant, he needs to recognize that hurts because that's his defense is just stuff things away and move on. And then it all comes out later in some, you know, when he's trying to do some task and the light bulb isn't going in right or whatever. But anyway, bottom line is I went out there and I said, I am really sorry I talked to you like that. You know, obviously there's a lot going on. And he was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. You know, and I said, no, it's not
No,
fine.
it's
Your
not.
heart
No.
matters. I was like, your heart matters. And I apologize for for hurting it. And he was like, okay, well, I really appreciate that. And that's in my opinion, that's good enough. Right. I
You
mean, look at
know,
it. We're a chaotic group and you know, we slip up and we have little moments, but we come back together and we know how to repair.
everybody talks about the repair. The
Hmm.
Gottmans talk about it, the repair being the
Yeah.
big thing. If you can't repair, yeah, I think when we were probably you and I were in college, the conventional wisdom, if you don't know how to fight, you don't know how to be in a relationship. But it was
Yeah.
wrong. It was if you don't know how to repair, you don't know how to be in a relationship, right? Because we
I
went
agree.
to
Yeah.
do fight nice. And that was so version 1.0 of what you're talking about, right?
Right.
You, you, we don't always handle things intellectually. Like when you look back at your own childhood, because
Hmm.
I'm sure you've done all this inventory,
Hmm.
can you pinpoint anything you wish you knew about your parents or wish you understood about your parents that might have changed your ability to attach later in life?
I don't think I oh, attach with other people later in
Yeah.
life. Um, I guess I mean, ultimately, there are a few things I could list, but the biggest would be just understanding, like, I'm not really bad. I got a lot of messages that, in my family, it wasn't like, "Oh, this isn't okay to do," right? Like, "This behavior isn't gonna work, and, we need to fix this, but, like, you're not bad, and help me understand why you were needing to hit your sister or write on the wall," or whatever kids do, that is not okay. And help me let's talk about the feelings. And so you don't have to act out on those feelings all the time. So you can get some support here, um, instead of going into these behaviors. And so instead, I got all these messages that, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're fundamentally bad, you're fundamentally flawed, you're, all these terrible things. And I guess I wish I could go back and tell my child self, like, you're not bad, you're good. They don't know how to deal with their own feelings. They have a lot of shame. They feel like they're bad. And if they can get you to not be bad, they get to look better, or their life gets to be more comfortable or whatever. And they just don't have the skills to handle this. You are not bad. I think that would have helped quite a bit, because a
Oh, I'm
lot of
sure.
that's shame inducing. I mean, that's really shame is what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of years acting on shame. And when you're acting on shame and not talking about shame and healing shame, you are definitely pushing people away. I mean, you're hurting your relationships with others and yourself.
Did your parents ever come to a point where they understand the impact of this strictly religious upbringing on you? Do
I
you think
don't
they did?
I think my dad he passed away, but I think I don't know that he understood that impact about the religion, because he died really being, you know, committed to that religion. But I think my dad had more capacity. He's a little more like me, and that he had some capacity to recognize impact of behavior. Um, my mom, I hope she's not listening, but if she is listening, I'm the hard facts. She to this day, I mean, to this day, it's like she read the book. She loved the book, right? And but her way of speaking about the book is talking about her own childhood and talking about how she was impacted. And like, I'm realizing this and I'm realizing that. And there's zero curiosity about how I may have been impacted.
Yeah.
Any conversation that gets close to how I was impacted is just kind of falls back to, I just had no idea. And I'm just like, you're reading the book about it. Like,
You're like, "The
so
book's in front of you, mom," but she's giving
yeah,
you that validation that the book is powerful and
yes.
helpful.
And
She
that
just
does,
can't put on the
yeah,
lens of you were the child.
no, no. And it's like she wants, I kind of get stuck. Kind of get pulled into this dynamic where I'm helping her make sense and helping her with her feelings. And I get off the phone and I'm just like, wow. I don't,
Nice to be
that's a big word
parentified
for
for you
me
now.
is,
It's
yeah.
nice
I
to be
mean,
parentified, yeah.
yeah, it's not. I mean, I don't know if you can relate to this, but like I don't feel like I have a mom, and I feel like
Mm,
there's a big hole in my heart. There's always been kind of a big hole. And I do have a mom, in a lot of ways she does show up for me. So I shouldn't say it's all or nothing, but there's this part of this wiser, stronger other to kind
mm.
of guide you through life. And I have always really felt like that's missing. And I've really always kind of been looking for that. So at least I can be that for my parents, but
And
I
isn't
mean,
that, I
for my
mean, and
kids,
not
for my
only
kids.
that, you're that for your kids and you're that for all these
Yeah.
people that are reading this book, and your energy is so much like that. I spoke with someone else on the podcast, Dr. Amanda Hansen. She's known as a
Mhm.
midlife muse. She also talks a lot about showing up for herself in the way she figured out the adults around her couldn't.
Yeah.
There's so much
Yeah.
of that in our generation, I think, where
Well, we, I don't know,
girls know how
as
to do
Gen
that.
Xers, I
Yeah,
mean, we're really, I don't know if you know this, but, I'm assuming you were born in 77.
yeah.
Okay. I was born in 76. So 1976 and 1977 were the lowest birth rate years in last century and this century. So we're
Really?
really kind of rare, and I could really bore you with all the different dynamics around who was giving birth. This was the birth control era. So it was
Ah,
like who was giving birth instead of taking birth control and going on with education and stuff. And so it's really fascinating who we come from, because we really aren't boomers and we really aren't millennials. And so
yeah.
I don't know about you, but I was a latchkey kid. So, and that was kind of epidemic at
Oh, for sure.
at that time, and it
That's
was kind of like
wild.
everybody was getting divorced at that time. So my parents didn't, but all my friends' parents were. And so anyway, the point is that um there was a certain, I think, in our generation, like we had to be independent. We're very overwhelmingly self-sufficient people.
Yeah, yeah, and to a fault in many
Yes.
cases, showing up
Yes.
now in midlife. I love this topic because, I'm Indian and I grew up in a house where my parents were immigrants and they were
Mhm.
arranged. So they met and they were married 2
Wow.
weeks later. Meanwhile, they
That's
are one
um,
of the happiest couples
that's
among
amazing.
arranged as well as among American couples
That's
of my
amazing.
whole parents' generation. I have tons of friends from, white, black, everything,
Yeah,
friends from everywhere, and they're still some of the happiest couples. And I've always attributed
that's
it to a
really beautiful.
combination of things. Number
Mhm.
one, they had similar expectations about what they're supposed to do for each other, and it's
Mhm.
very simple, right?
Okay.
They have really clear and agreed upon cultural ideas
Sure.
about how one is to respect one's wife, how one is to respect one's
Mhm.
husband, how you build each other up, how you that kind of thing, right? But then on top of that, they happen to also develop a big fat crush on each other. And I always tell them they were just
Mhm.
lucky because you didn't know, right? You didn't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but watching all of that and trying to weave it in with the tapestry of growing up watching movies like Dirty Dancing,
Yeah.
made
Yeah.
things complicated for the Indian girls of our generation.
Yes.
And, when you talk about birth control, yeah, that was also a generation where people were having abortions and it was okay and it was
Yep.
normal and it was, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I always think of it as the grandparents' generation was really the last one where roles were just set.
Mhm.
But women didn't complain about a lot of the things that they
Mhm.
would have in our grandmother's generation if they could, but that doesn't mean they didn't have moments of happiness along the way, but they also told themselves the story they need to tell themselves to make it through. Then there's our mother's generation where our mothers and fathers were the first with birth control and the first with, all that kind of thing. And so they had
Mhm.
more freedom and there was more choice. They were contending with different concerns, right?
Mhm.
And what it meant to keep sort of the society and the community's fabric
Mhm.
together. And I think our generation's the first that maybe very stupidly went into dating and marriage thinking it would be a lot like dating, feeling like if
Right.
we could date these people and it worked no matter how different they were from us and
Right.
how different their
Yep.
upbringing, that he's reasonable, I'm reasonable. If we can figure out if we're having sushi or Mexican, then I'm sure we can figure out how to raise a family. No, you can't. No, you
I
can't.
could not
You have
agree
no idea.
more with what you're
Right?
saying. Yeah,
Because you don't know what their template is, and we figured out they
exactly.
were templates that were written on our souls that nobody was looking at because we were busy having our weekends in Miami. And so now fast forward, and there's the next generation of divorce, but we're trying so actively to get it back on track,
Yep.
which is why we need books like yours, right? Um, and I appreciate the work that you're doing because whether I'm ever
Yeah.
partnered again or not, this has been a useful inventory for me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what you're saying, it's fascinating. Like we could sit here for 2 more hours
Yeah.
and go back and forth about, the expectations and how confused our society is. We are so confused about so many things. We just don't know how to do anything, and there's too many options sometimes, and so
And it's
it's
that
fascinating.
independence that it's become like a toxic level of independence
Yeah.
for our generation because we do need each other. And this idea
Mhm.
of, people use inflammatory language and they talk about women have been sold a story that they are fine on their own, and that's a lie. Well, that's also an inflammatory statement. Yes, they're
Yes.
fine on their own, but yes, we're also
Yes.
designed to connect.
Yeah, it's
How about
so
middle ground?
not all or nothing.
Calm down.
Yeah.
Men also, by the way, need people, men, women, I don't care what your sexual orientation is, people need connection. And this idea that a life
Absolutely.
is full completely without it, I think in very, very rare cases, it really is. Um,
Yeah, I know there was a question that you asked, and it's kind of coming up now that I never answered. So I'm going to give a quick answer to it. You said, "Why? How do you get men on board with emotional closeness?" And the way you do that is you let them experience it being successful. That's when they come on board. When they start to realize there's something, this actually isn't a bad idea. Because the reason that they're not, one of the reasons, and again, there's layers, is that they have learned that that's not a good thing, that it doesn't lead anywhere good. And it makes them weak, or it, sets them up for whatever. And so when I have a male or even a female who has an avoidant attachment, my goal is to help them experience it as successful. So instead of your partner coming to you and heated with concerns, and you going into your avoidant non-emotionally supportive response of either shutting down or just trying to get them to feel better, or telling them they shouldn't feel that way, or they're irrational, which what is that going to do? It's just going to inflame your partner more and make things worse for you, because then it's not going to end, right? And so when they can get these tools, that is just like, okay, I'm kind of learning over here to tap into my own emotions, and because of that, I can validate your emotions, and all of a sudden it works, and they're not going into an hour-long fight where their partner ends up, even more upset, and they feel unsuccessful and like a failure, and you've just given them this tool to be successful in relationships. They're on board quickly. I love working with men, and more specifically avoidant, because sometimes it is women, and 25% of the time. And I love working with them because they move so fast once they feel safe, and once they know that this is for good. It's not just, sappy connection that's going to make me feel like unmasculated or whatever. So
yeah,
anyway,
it's
that's the
the
answer to that
emasculation that
question.
is the biggest fear of this
Yeah.
generation of avoidance, I would say, you know?
Well, my mentor that teaches me virtually everything I know, he's actually going to be joining me with some sound clips on the podcast, is an ex New York City firefighter. um, Went in 9/11, went in, rescued people from the buildings, happened to be training at the time to become a therapist. Sue
Mm.
Johnson of EFT, the Gottmans, came out and personally trained him because of the situation, the context. It was 9/11, and there was so much need. And he's extremely masculine. He's extremely empathic and gentle. He works with the NFL, he works with veterans, and I feel like because I learned from him, I find it exceptionally easy to help men, because
That makes
that's
a lot
what
of
his
sense.
platform is. What?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I did interview someone else on the podcast will be coming out soon. His name is Brett Lockett. He was an NFL player, and then he became a love coach.
Okay.
And
I love it.
when I reached out to him, I thought, I have some experience with the NFL. When I was in business school, I taught a continuing education program for NFL players. I have my MBA and I have a whole other career
Uh-huh.
that's not all podcast related. It was in real estate and private equity, but I had a room full of NFL players who were my students, some 12,
Wow.
13 years ago, and I've stayed in touch with them. So I have some understanding of the letdown after the
Oh
NFL.
gosh, that
And
must
what we
be.
talked about was ego.
Yeah.
What I wanted to
Yeah.
go deep with him on was toxic masculinity and ego,
Mhm.
because I think vulnerability is about letting go of your fear, right?
Right.
And all of the
Really?
topics
Yeah.
we're discussing in the podcast come down to the same thing. We're scared.
We're
Everybody's
scared.
just scared. We
Everybody's
need an
scared.
emotional release. That's why we
Yeah.
need each other's stories. And that's why I wanted to ask you personal questions. Thank you for answering them.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah.
I have one last
Great.
question for you.
Okay. Very good. Hit me.
Knowing what you know now, 24 years and change into your marriage, what advice would you go back and give yourself if you could pop in on your own wedding day?
Mm. Well, one of the one would be, hey girl, you have a part in this problem.
Hey, girl, you're part of the
Yeah.
problem.
Yes. Yes, that would be a big one because I really did not know how to make sense of our problems that started before we were married. I mean, I think we were together 3 years, I guess. Oh, maybe 4 years before we got married. So, I mean, we'd already started to have problems, but I
Mhm.
really did make sense of it as he's the wrong one. He's not showing up for me. He's not showing up for me. And just kind of thought, well, I wouldn't be reacting like I did if he were showing up better. And I guess it would have been nice to know, hey, there is a lot you can do on your side of the street to better this. And because I did, I mean, we never had a therapist. I mean, we tried a couple for, back before I started doing this work, and they weren't good and didn't help at all. And it wasn't until I started learning this, and when you start to become really good at your job, which I'm sure you can relate to, it becomes incredibly difficult to find anyone to help you because you just like what to expect. And so anyway, bottom line is I had to do this work by changing me because he wasn't learning what I was learning. I mean, here I am becoming a therapist. There's no way he's going to meet me. So anyway, I would have liked to have heard that. That would have been incredibly useful information. And
Well,
maybe that's why I really try to drive it home so much in the book too. And
can we have him
ultimately,
in for the counterpoint? Can we give him a
yes,
chance to voice his own counterpoint? Because
sure.
that would be hilarious. And what kind of work does he do?
He's an attorney, which is got its own layers. His job is to win arguments and look at things intellectually and line up facts. And that was not helpful for us. So that would probably be his answer, would be how to be more emotionally supportive.
All right, I just changed my
Yeah.
mind. I was going to say that I'm going to invite you back on the podcast, but I basically want your husband to give his counterpoints to everything that you say. But now what I want is for the two of you to just come on the next time there's an argument about the bed thing or the
Yeah.
camping or something else. And then
Yeah.
I'm going to eat my popcorn and then I'm going to watch
Yeah.
and you guys are going to resolve it beautifully. And I'm going to feel so brave
I,
about relationships.
I almost want to call him and and have you ask the
Oh
question.
my God, let's do that.
Okay, let's do it.
No, because the world needs to know.
Yeah. So, oh shoot, I gotta disable airplane mode. Okay.
See if he answers.
He probably will. He's really good about that, unless he's in a meeting. He'll go, babe. That's how he answers the phone. Babe. Babe. Hey, I'm on a podcast right now and she has a question for you. Okay. Okay.
Hi, hubby. We've been hearing wonderful things about you and your 24 years and counting marriage. And I asked Julie, knowing what she knows now, what advice would she give herself if she could pop back in on her own wedding day? What advice would you give yourself?
Is this a trick question? No, it's actually a real question.
It's real. It's real because, to be with someone who is spending her entire life helping other people figure out how to relate, I'm sure has been a cakewalk for you. But also, probably has taught you a lot, right? Even if you're not doing this work. And she pointed out that you're an attorney, so it's your job to win arguments.
Oof.
So, same question to you. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself if you could pop in and whisper in your own ear as you're getting all dolled up on your wedding day?
Well, I would say this, and it's the title of a book that Julie bought at one point, and it is "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff," and it's all small stuff. Meaning, have confidence in the person you're marrying and just don't get worked up. It works out. That's what I'd say.
I love it. Well, we know it works out 6 kids later, and you've got this gorgeous, brilliant wife. So we know you're doing something right. Thank you for humoring me.
Of course. I thought you were going to say Learn emotional support skills.
Well, I think that's part of it, right? Is, um, instead of always barking and getting worked up because you're anxious about something turning out right, it's like just relax, be supportive, recognize the process is going to recognize that it's going to turn out okay.
If you're emotionally supportive.
I agree with that. Yeah. Did I fail the test?
No, I love you. You're the best, honestly.
I
You're
love you
you're the
too.
best. Okay. Bye.
All
Mwah.
right. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So funny. It's
That's
all going to
fantastic.
magically work out
Okay.
because
Oh.
you're married to a couples therapist.
Okay, so that's my plan. Look for a couples
Yeah.
therapist. Got it. Got it.
No, I mean, he's funny because I think what he really is trying to say is if you get anxious about it, kind of catastrophizing the future when there's something going on, there's a trigger, there's a fight or whatever, you're going to show up on that fear. You're going to react to the fear, like you said with your son, inappropriate to the actual situation. And I think he means like taking a step back, regulating. That gives you the space to be more emotionally supportive. And
Yeah.
that's what he's trying to say, I think, in his roundabout way. He
Yeah.
just doesn't know how to quite put the words to that because it isn't true that everything works out. But I think he's saying, don't be so afraid in these moments of like the whole future falling apart because of this one moment. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it sounds like you found the person that you were supposed to be with, and so did he.
Yeah, he's the best. He
And
really is.
lucky for all of
Yeah.
us, because otherwise you'd be spending more time dating and less time writing books like this, which we all needed.